Hey everybody, as you can see we're in the webcam and screen capture setup again today, and that's because I've got some IEMs to talk about. I'm going to do these as 3 different videos this time, and I'm going to start off with the Tigerism Helianthus IEM. This is an exclusive model to Appos Audio, so I want to say a huge thanks to them for sending it out, and it's the first time I've had a listen to these. I've done measurements already, but this is going to be the first time, I think for all 3 of the IEMs that I'm covering over the next 3 days, it's the very first time I'm actually listening to them properly. And so let's jump straight into the review without any further delay. This is the Tigerism Helianthus box that it comes in. Nice compact box. These are a planar magnetic IEM. We'll have a look at the sales page in a moment. But just to give you an idea of what to expect, inside the box you get this kind of chunky square leather case. It's a bit different from what we're used to. And then inside we've got the IEMs themselves. I'll come back to those in a minute. Really nice thick solid cable on those. You also get a little pouch, and the pouch is designed in such a way that it actually divides the IEM. So when you put them away, you can put one IEM in each side, protect them from banging together. That's kind of nice. And inside there, we've also got a range of different sort of tips that seem like nice, decent tips as well. So yeah, so you've got some sort of clear silicone tips with what feels to be a pretty rigid tube, the bit that goes over the nozzle. And then you've got some other ones which are a bit shallower. So the actual from top to bottom is a bit shallower. And the overall feel of them is a bit softer as well by the feel of it. And so what I might actually do for this video is I'm going to test them, I'm going to listen to them, that is, with, they come with these little sort of lavender coloured tips that look like they'll be the right size for my ears, so we're going to give those a go. Coming back to the specifications for a moment before we get into it, this is on the Appos website. As far as I know, this is the only place to buy them. I believe they're exclusive. They might be exclusive only in the US for Appos. I haven't looked into the exclusivity, but you can see here they're a lovely metallic molded shell. In reality, the color of the shell is a little bit different to what you see on the website. They're a little bit darker looking than what I'm seeing in the pictures, but that other than that, it's pretty accurate. You've got these lovely face plates that look like a, I don't know if it's a synthetically made thing or if it's, yeah, I think it's a swirl of paint in acrylic of some sort. As we look down, it's a 14mm planar magnetic driver, all the normal stories about why they're great, strong magnets, etc., etc. But the things that I actually care about when it comes to IEMs is we've got a sensitivity of 101 decibels. I'm guessing that's per milliwatt, and impedance at 16 ohms. So very easy to drive, very straightforward to drive. For all this testing, I'm going to be using the Chord Mojo 2, streaming from the Chord Poly, and driven by Rune will be my source streaming out to the Poly. And then just quickly to talk about this cable, as I said, really nice cable. It actually feels a bit like some of the Effect Audio cables where it's got that quite thick single sheath per channel. So obviously inside there is some sort of multi-stranded left, right, or positive, negative, I should say, core. So that's kind of nice. And it all feels pretty premium for a $500 odd US IEM, which by the way, that's what these cost. So for $500 odd US, you're getting a really nice looking and feeling IEM in my opinion. If we have a quick look at the graph, and if this is the first IEM review of mine that you've seen lately, I've now got all my measurements over on a SquigLink site. So it's just pfs.squiglink, sorry, pfs.squig.link. You can see it down here on the screen. And so if we have a look, this is what the Helianthus looks like in terms of measurements. Now, what I've got on screen at the moment is the etymologic neutral target. It's the one that I probably find the best in terms of if you're looking for a true neutral, if there is such a thing, because we all hear it a little bit differently. But I think this is the closest to a true neutral that I sort of relate to. If I then show you my personal preference curve, and I'm going to get rid of the etymologic one for a second, that's my personal preference. So I generally like a bit more bass and a bit more mid-range than what the Helianthus delivers. But having said that, if you saw my recent roundup of the IEMs around about sort of 60 to 150 US dollars, there were a couple in there that did diverge from this target. One in particular being the Elise Audio Canera Celeste Dark Phoenix. That was absolutely brilliant despite diverging from this. So I'm not a huge fan of targets. I'm putting it there more so that you get a sense of what my general preferences are. And if we look at it compared to the etymologic target, you can see that I'm quite different to what that sort of true neutral target looks like. So that's just there as a reference point for us. So for now, what I might do is I might stick with the etymologic target for now. And what I might also do is press this little squiggle button down here and just flatten that target out. So what we're expecting to hear from the Helianthus based on a diffuse field or neutral type target is raised bass, slightly reduced mid-range, and a bit of high-end treble emphasis. The 8K peak, or around about 8K peak, is an artifact from the coupler, so we don't worry too much about that, but there could be a little bit of peakiness in the upper end. That's quite possible. So let's have a listen and we'll see how they sound. So listening to these, they immediately remind me of what I would call a hi-fi sound, and it's kind of this gentle V-shaped sound where you've got some extra bass, you've got some extra treble, but it's not an extreme V shape. And it just brings, particularly this extra treble energy, brings a sense of crispness and clarity to them. But the reason I'm saying it's like a hi-fi sound is that it also brings a sense that it's a deliberate tuning choice. It makes them sound a certain way that's not necessarily entirely neutral to my ears, or neutral's the wrong word, not entirely natural to my ears. They're a really enjoyable IEM, but they've definitely got that kind of crisp, clean, listen to how clean I can be kind of presentation that some people are going to love, and they are very enjoyable. Others may find they're not natural enough because of it, and that's going to be a personal choice question. What they do really nicely, mid-range just kind of pops out of nowhere. If we just take the flattening off for a moment, I want to just go back to my target instead of the edemotic one because I can relate to this much more easily. What you find is that this energy here, where they're starting to push that peak sort of close to 3K, thankfully not too high at 2K, because that's where I start to have trouble with it. What this is doing is it's bringing a sense of clarity, and it's kind of popping the vocals out of space a little bit. But all the combination of the sort of high frequency emphasis here with the slight reduction in the mid-range, what that's meaning is that it's also kind of popping out of space a little bit artificially, which is very exciting and fun, but it's also not entirely natural. The stage, I would say, is also not hugely deep. It's got a great sense of left-right layering and scale and imaging, but it's not giving me a lot of depth and layering in the soundstage across multiple tracks. And I know the Chord Mojo 2 can absolutely deliver that sort of layering and imaging, so it's not the source, it's definitely the IEM itself. Having said that, they're really, really enjoyable. At $500, I think they're a lovely sounding IEM, so long as you like that slightly crisp, sort of enhanced top end that brings a sense of clarity without any harshness or fatigue, but it's not entirely a natural sound. And so I think, as is often the case, listening to these sorts of things in isolation, unless they're really wonky, which the Helianthus isn't, when we start to really understand them is when we start to have comparisons to other products. And so what I've selected for this comparison is what I think is probably one of the best $500 IEMs, and that's the Xenns Mangird Top, which I think is absolutely brilliant. As you can see straight away, the Mangird Top does kind of follow my preference curve a lot closer. It's got a little bit of treble energy. Its peak is a bit closer down towards 2 kilohertz, which is slightly problematic for me. And it's got also a sort of similar 4 kilohertz or 5 kilohertz, no, 4.5 kilohertz energy. It's got some stuff going on in the treble that for me is a little tiny bit problematic, but it depends a lot on the source I'm listening to, which tips I choose, etc. So that's an IEM that I think is fantastic at the price. It's probably my go-to recommendation around 500. So I was curious to put the two of them back to back, switch between them a couple of times and see which one comes out on top for me in an overall sense. And that means also putting aside my own tonal preferences and just talking about technicalities, which one's balancing tonal qualities better, which one sounds more natural across the board, all that sort of stuff, even if it doesn't necessarily suit my tonal preferences, because I already know the top is going to be better for me tonally, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best IEM for everybody. So let me grab the Xenns Top, take a listen, and then I'll tell you what I think. As an interesting side story while I'm getting these set up, I gifted a pair of these to a patron who had done a number of things for me, and I was appreciative, so I gifted a pair of these to him. And the reason I raise it is that when he got them, he was shocked that I'd sent him a basshead IEM, and I never thought of them as a basshead IEM because, as you can see here on the chart, it kind of hits my preference for what I think of as a fairly natural sound. And yet, if we bring back the edemotic reference curve, you can see that there's about a 10 dB boost from what edemotic would say is a neutral sound. And this goes back to the fact that we all have completely different sort of perceptual levels of bass, particularly for IEMs. And so what one person hears as a bass monster, another one hears as natural and neutral, and vice versa. So just an interesting side point there that we do all perceive things differently, and you need to work out for yourself, because no one else can tell you this, you need to work out for yourself what your specific kind of tolerances, preferences, your sensitivities in your ears. You need to work that out for yourself to properly understand how you and your ears relate to my graphs, my perceptions and descriptions, and for that matter, anybody else's, because we are all completely different in terms of how we perceive sound. And I don't mean that just at a subjective level. There's actually, and I've talked about this in a separate video called Why All IEM Reviews Are Wrong, we actually all have different shaped ear canals, and the length and the bends and where it compresses or gets wider, all of that changes the resonance of the ear canal and changes what we hear. So it's really important to get a handle on what your personal preferences and sensitivities are and compare that to some other reviewers and graphs and work that out for yourself. For now though, let's try out the Mangird Top. These are really interesting as a comparison point, that being the tops and the Helianthus. Going back and forth, one of the tracks I've stopped on was T for One by Led Zeppelin, and the difference between them becomes really evident in a couple of ways. One of them is that the Helianthus is clearly more treble emphasized. It's creating more energy around things like the cymbals, the snare, the articulation of the guitar work. And then when you get to the top, there's a moment where the bass guitar kicks in with quite a deep rumble in this track, and it's fairly early on, about the 30-second mark, where I've just stopped listening to the Helianthus, because that was something that really stood out to me. Was when I listened to the top, that guitar had weight and presence and body that balanced with everything else for my ears. When I went to the Helianthus, that was still there. I could hear it because I knew it was coming, but it was also a little bit behind everything else. And so two things to think about there. One of them is whether or not you prefer to hear bass level with everything, or if you like it a bit secondary, or of course, if you're someone that tends to hear what I might describe as a neutral IEM, you might hear as a bassy IEM, that's where the Helianthus might be better for you. Another really key area though, where these are quite different, is that the staging from the top, there's excellent image separation and placement, but it is all kind of a little bit more intimate than the Helianthus does. The Helianthus kind of explodes out the soundstage, both in terms of maximum sense of scale, but also the placement and the separation of each instrument. There's a really clear sense of where each instrument's placed that's very, very enjoyable. It reminds me a bit of what the 7 Hz Timeless does, which creates this really cavernous soundstage. The Helianthus are doing a bit of that as well. So I don't know if it's a planar magnetic thing. Perhaps it is. Maybe it's just the tuning. I'm not quite sure, but I very much enjoyed the staging presentation of the Helianthus. As I said before, I think tonally the top still wins for me because it's closer to my preferences. If I just go back over to those. So tonally, I think the top is closer to my personal preferences, but I think technicalities wise, there's some things the Helianthus are doing that the top, I wouldn't say it can't quite match. It just does it differently. And I think a lot of people are going to be really impressed with what the Helianthus does. So there's not a lot more I can say about it. I think it's a really solid IEM. I think it's beautifully made. The accessories are nothing short of exceptional. I think the cable is absolutely lovely. It kind of puts the cable on the top to shame in terms of the look and the feel of it. Sonics wise, who knows? I'm not comparing the cables, but the package that you get with the Helianthus is absolutely fantastic. Build quality, accessory quality, sound quality, technicalities is all brilliant. It's just going to come down, I think, to your preferences in terms of sound. They do lean a little bit bright, in my opinion. They're not a lean or lacking in bass IEM, but they are tilted a little bit towards an overall bright sound, in my opinion. If that's something you like, that's going to be perfect for you. If it's not something you go for, I think the top is still better. But if you do like what I'm saying about the Helianthus, they're going to reward you with a really excellent sense of clarity, resolution, staging and image placement is a real standout from them. So they're an IEM that I'm going to recommend if the tonality suits you, but recognizing that it's not a tonality that aligns 100% with me. They're an IEM that I would absolutely enjoy, but they're not an IEM that I would necessarily choose as my first option, if that makes sense. So hopefully this has been helpful for you. Hopefully I've introduced to you and explained the Helianthus effectively. And if it sounds like a good IEM for you, I'll put a link down below through to Atos. It is an affiliate link, so thank you to any and all people that buy through there. It's a great support for the channel. I'll also check and see if there's other links to other parts of the world, because Atos only ship to the US and Canada at this stage, as far as I know. And so I'll see what I can find. I'll put some links down below if that sounds like a good IEM for you. And with that said, I hope this video has been useful and helpful in helping you decide. And on that note, if you are enjoying these reviews and you want to see my upcoming reviews just to let you know what's coming, I also have The C Audio Nico, or Neko, I'm not sure how it's meant to be said. I'm going to call it the Nico. That's coming up next. That'll be tomorrow's video. Then we've also got, and I'm comparing it to the Auravedi OH700VB, which I really, really enjoyed when I tried it recently. And then I've also got the T Audio Hype 10 coming up. That's a really interesting one because, as you can see, it's a pretty good match for my target curve. Not quite perfect, but pretty good. So that's another one to keep an eye out for. That's going to be the day after. So make sure you like this video if you've enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell if you want to see these next two videos I've just mentioned. But for now, let me leave to the music. So happy listening, be kind to each other, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.